It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Got an interesting email from one of my Teamster listeners who sent me a Sean O'Brien threat. As you know, Sean O'Brien is the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. The Teamsters have, for one reason or another, and that keeps getting in weirder waters, chose not to endorse something I said would happen over a year ago. But hey, here we are, surprise! They chose not to endorse. And the argument that O'Brien has been making is, well, both parties suck. And, this listener sent me this thing saying, hey, what do you think of this? So what the thread was is someone had tweeted out that Mark Cuban, who is a Harris surrogate, said that, if Harris is elected, she should get rid of Lina Khan, who's the Federal Trade Commission chair, who's been doing a lot of really great stuff. Everyone on the right side of history loves Lina Khan. So Bernie Sanders tweets out that Mark Cuban's wrong. Lina Khan is the best FTC chair in modern history. He said by taking on corporate greed and illegal monopolies, Lina is doing an exceptional job preventing large corporations from ripping off consumers and exploiting workers. And he says, thank you, Lina Khan, for doing what you're doing. So Sean O'Brien jumps into this and says, Bernie Sanders is right. Candidates talk a big game about standing up to big tech, but if they really want to prove it, they'll keep Lina Khan right where she is. And I'm with Sean on this. Keep Lina Khan right where she's at, without question. Love Lina Khan, doing a great job. Sean O'Brien thinks so. Problem is we know Trump is going to throw her to the curb, and everyone else in the Biden administration. The Jennifer Abruzzios of the world, the Jonathan Cantors. You go down the list of agency heads who are doing incredible work for working people. They're all going to go. Jennifer Abruzzo, I've talked about numerous times, doing incredible stuff at the NLRB, doing what the original intent, the original mission of the National Labor Relations Act is, and that is to promote people to join and form unions, which is why Sean O'Brien is claiming so many victories throughout the country. Because you have a government that is not hostile to union organizing. Now understand, during the Trump years, and I remember this because I lived through them, union organizing was not something encouraged by the Trump administration. In fact, their general counsel, unlike Jennifer Abruzzo, was a guy who was instrumental in firing the Patco workers during the Reagan years. Someone who has spent his life at destroying workers' ability to collectively bargain. So I hear this comment from President O'Brien about how both parties suck. They've both screwed us over. They're both bad. And understand what this kind of, they both suck kind of rhetoric does. Or should, I think what people who use it want to do. And that's people don't participate. That's all I can come up with, because I have to believe Sean O'Brien knows that the best people for union organizing are going to be Democrats in those positions. Now, they may not be great, but they're not going to be the ones who fired the Patco workers. Or a corporate lawyer like Eugene Scalia, or go down the list. And it's this both sidesism that has me just losing my freaking mind in this moment. Because you stop and you think about, what Republicans have been trying to shove down workers' throats for decades. Right to work laws come right to mind. I don't know many Democratic governors that said, hey, I think right to work would be great for this state. I know Donald Trump has said, and it's on tape, I like right to work. We should do right to work. And yet, somehow, anybody but Trump didn't get the endorsement of the Teamsters. In the public sector, you've got Republicans who have been targeting government unions limiting their ability to collectively bargain, limiting what they can bargain over. And of course, the whole no rights at work agenda that they've rammed through on the federal level, thanks to our Supreme Court and the Janus decision, which we didn't hear Sean O'Brien talk anything about. Trump's court appointees, not a peep. And yet, oddly enough, one of the most destructive parts of his administration are those rules. You've got states in this country that have got anti-collective bargaining laws, limiting and restricting collective bargaining for certain groups, like education or public sector workers or you name it. They changed the rules for elections, for union elections, so that we drag them out a little bit longer, so employers have the ability to hold those captive audience meetings that they love so much. Again, Democrats aren't pushing for that. So again, both parties suck. Yeah, sometimes they do. But they're not comparable in the world that you're talking about. And this is where my frustration is. And I think about the pension issue. I keep coming back to that. I know people who are concerned, crying, grown men, that they were going to get their pensions cut by 40, 50, 60%. And they had no idea how they were going to survive. They've spent their entire working lives believing that at the end of the road, they were going to have this pension. And they were going to enjoy time with their loved ones. They sacrificed for years, missed holidays, missed weekends, missed kids' ball games because they were working jobs that had to work over the weekend. Myself, as a road driver for a trucking company, I can't tell you how many things I missed. But knowing that, hey, that pension is going to be there at the end, that I'm building security for my family, I'm putting food on the table, a roof over their head, and I'm working towards something. To then, at the end of the race, have the rug ripped out from under you. And look, they could have done something during the Trump years. If Trump truly was, if the Republicans truly are the party of the working class, they had every opportunity. And I said back during his term, you want to turn a lot of working people in your favor? Backstop these pensions. Don't let these pensions go belly up. Don't do to these workers what we've done to generations of workers who've been screwed over by corporate America and bad conservative ideology and policy. Don't do it. And they still did. It was Joe Biden who said, no, we're not going to let these workers get screwed. And you go down the list. I mean, all of this education stuff, the school choice stuff, all that is union busting. That's the whole point. It's to get into education in corporations' pockets, so they can privatize education, profitize it, and line their pockets. And oh, by the way, we can go after those teachers and their unions, so we can get those women to work for poverty wages again. Like the good old days. But of course, both sides suck equally. And like I said, we haven't even talked about how bad the Supreme Court is, thanks to Donald Trump. We haven't done that. And again, this idea that we didn't endorse because we didn't get everything we wanted. I'm taking my ball and going home. It's disgraceful to me that my union is on the wrong side of history. And that the possibility of Donald Trump being in the White House again, doing all the horrible things he did while he was in office the first time, that's possible because my union made it possible. And if there is another Supreme Court justice opening in the next term, and Donald Trump is there to fill that, labor unions in this country will be under even greater attack. And in fact, as I've said numerous times, they will revive the Lochner era. We're almost there. They will revive the era of, hey, if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages and deplorable conditions, it's your right, it's your liberty, it's your freedom. So for me, this idea of they both suck is ludicrous. Have Democrats been perfect? No. There's a lot of things I can point to that go, yeah, we got to work on that. But to put them on the same level with Donald Trump, with George W. Bush, with Ronald Reagan, sorry, you lost me, buddy. Completely lost me. Want to hear your thoughts. You buy in this both sidesism, or do you see it as equally destructive as I do? And also the messaging of the wealth class. I want to hear it. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Michael Sainato, labor reporter at The Guardian, going to be here to share some thoughts on what's going on in Florida. Back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So we've seen the hurricanes come through, and what's interesting to me is the number of Republicans who have voted against funding FEMA now complaining that they're not doing anything, and the very people who were saying, look, we don't need no stinking government, now going, hey, where's the government? And I look at Florida, Ron DeSantis being at the top of that list as Florida has been hit with Hurricane Milton. Helene was bad. Here to share some thoughts on, what's going on in Florida and how he's doing. I've asked our good friend Michael Sainato to come talk with us. Michael's a labor reporter over at The Guardian U.S. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me on again.
So how are you doing? How are things in your neck of the woods? You okay?
I'm good. Luckily, it didn't cross through Gainesville, so I'm a couple hours north of Orlando and Tampa, the areas that got hit. So, but we were in the path of the evacuation. So, and I live kind of close to I-75, so I was there the other day. People were using the shoulder as an extra lane. It was pretty crazy. Yeah,
it's getting out is. In a hurry is the smart thing to do. But here's the thing that gets me is, and I'm looking at these horrible pictures on the news. I'm looking at these videos of all this damage and destruction. And then I see these folks, who are out there bashing FEMA, bashing a government response, bashing the fact that there isn't enough money to fund FEMA. And I'm going, there's kind of a reason for all that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Republicans didn't want to, they voted against boosting the budget for FEMA. They're the ones pushing all the austerity measures, and these natural disasters and events, they're becoming more frequent. They're getting worse. They're costing more money, and they're not willing to put the resources on it. But they're more than willing to place the blame on anyone but themselves when these things happen, and the reaction and response is slow or inadequate, as it was for after Helene. Throughout Florida, from even where I live in Gainesville, we had debris and things that just weren't being fixed. And that was 2 weeks ago. There's really no good excuse for it other than they're just not putting the resources in place to properly respond and fix these issues.
And where does that come from? Is that a federal response issue? Is that a state response issue? Is this Joe Biden not getting his tool belt on, or is this Ron DeSantis not getting his cute white boots on? What is it?
It's just both. I grew up in New York. Coming to Florida, infrastructure is horrible. And just outdated. Things are, it takes slower. And this is, obviously this is just, anecdotally from my experience, but it's also systemic issues as well. Like, the evacuation notices, it would make sense for trains to, people to be able to take a train out instead of clogging up the highways. And, you saw, the videos and stories of people running out of gas, so that there was no proper evacuation or resources in place, so that didn't happen, and left people in dangerous positions where they were stranded on the highway with nowhere to go, and a car running out of empty when
that blocks up everything. I don't see this as a federal response problem. There aren't armies of federal FEMA workers who are going to drop in and do all this stuff. To me, this sounds like a local states issue. This is a leadership from DeSantis on down. The county should have this stuff, emergency management planning. And I know a lot of places do. This sounds like a local issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Florida, one of the big issues we do have is, prison labor. They're relying to cut costs, cut corners, prisoners filling up sandbags when, those could be proper jobs for, with union members, doing things like that. But instead, if they're doing it at all, they're doing it the most cheaply way possible. And just not putting, the resources into, here in Florida, we don't even have a labor department. Like none statewide, just doesn't exist. It's dumbfounding. Like,
so when you say that, my mind goes to this place because one of the things we've been talking about today on the program is the fact that Sean O'Brien went on the Theo Von podcast and basically said, both parties suck. They're both bad. They're both no good. This whole both sidesism argument. But I look at a state like Florida, run by Republicans, and you're telling me they don't even have a Department of Labor, let alone a plan to get people out in an area that is going to see these storms, not just the ones we've seen, but much greater ones down the road. You would think some bit of planning, some bit of government action. But I guess from people who don't believe in government, I shouldn't be surprised.
No, you shouldn't be surprised. And, obviously the both sides is of it's, the argument, obviously there are things wrong with both sides, but they're not, the equity there is, day and night. And I think conflating the two is, irresponsible and kind of, small-minded.
And dangerous. Because ultimately, when you have this kind of both sides, as you say, both sides suck, what you're telling people is there's no way forward. They're both terrible. Just don't participate. And that, to me, is even more dangerous than picking a side, even if you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and again, I come back to this because the response to me is problematic, given the fact that that area of the country, like it or not, is going to see more of these storms as climate change happens. These storms are going to get worse. And you've got someone like Ron DeSantis who has now said something. What did he say about climate change people and these the Marjorie Taylor Greene types who think that Joe Biden can make it rain whenever he wants? What did he say about them?
He responded to a question on weather control conspiracies, claiming that the leftists pushing the climate crisis agenda are two sides of the same coin. So he conflated them as being equally when, obviously that's ridiculous. One has incredible scientific backing and scientific evidence and being led by science, and the other is just baseless conspiracies with no evidence supporting it whatsoever.
Led by Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, any statement with Marjorie Taylor Greene said, I don't need to hear anything else after that.
Yeah.
Because I know it's going to be crazy. And and not helpful. But I look at this, and as we're looking at these responses, I look at the number of Republicans who have voted against FEMA funding, and it's amazing to me watching Donald Trump say, "Oh, they're only giving people $750 for all their possessions," and all of this misinformation out there. Are you seeing the same kind of rhetoric coming your way as a reporter?
I've seen some, what's coming from Trump and those. That kind of spectrum of the political spectrum is really concerning because it's, Trump has that GoFundMe. There's been GoFundMe for charities, which is like, if you're an organization, kind of like it raises some questions of charity fraud. And you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. Her campaign manager was charged and indicted and found guilty for charity fraud for the East Palestine disaster last year. He's been, linked to Operation Halo, one of those, far right groups doing, GoFundMe raising recently in North Carolina. So, Ivanka Trump was out there, it's they're, making those appearances not to help people. Donald Trump is supposedly a billionaire. He putting his money to help these people, to fix these people. If he was, you'd hear about it all over the news. He's not, lifting a finger. He's using it as a publicity stunt, and using it as a platform to spew the same kind of rhetoric he's been known for the past 8 years.
Well, if he is a billionaire, he didn't get to be a billionaire by giving things away and by helping people. And I look at the perfect example of this is Elon Musk. I'm sure you've seen the story about Starlink and his claim that they're giving it away, only to find out that, well, not really. It seems more like an introductory offer to you going and buying the equipment and signing up for a year-long program. But hey, you got a month.
Yeah, Elon Musk is, makes outlandish claims. He's done it for years. He's every few years he says we're going to be colonizing Mars the next few years. And he's been doing that for the past decade.
He can go.
Just to generate, views, publicity, making outlandish claims and, trying to position himself as someone at the forefront of, these new technologies, when in reality he's just a grifter.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to send him to the moon or to Mars or wherever, just as long as not here. But ultimately, this is going to come down to November. It always comes down to who we vote for, who we put into the offices of power, and how our government operates. So am I surprised in a situation like Florida that things seem to be broken? No, not really, because you've got people who don't believe in government running governments. That's why this election season is so incredibly important. And one of the races I've been following, not sure if you've been following it, but this Senate race out in Nebraska with this independent union guy who right now it appears polling ahead of Senator Fisher.
Yeah, I think he's taken everyone by surprise there, and he started with nothing. So he was a union leader in the Kellogg strike,
right,
a couple years ago.
No, the bakery confectionery workers, the BCTGM, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that that's where it comes from, and he decided the Democrats aren't going to really field a candidate against the incumbent Republican who is basically the run-of-the-mill Republican, not representing the people or anything like that, just used to not having to actually run campaigns, just because it's it's one of those states where if you're running as a Republican, you're kind of a shoo-in for election and re-election. Dan Osborne is a case of he's disrupting that, and he's doing the work he's by engaging in these town halls all across the state and actually talking to people, explaining who he is, what he's all about, representing the working class and those interests, and not merely being beholden to, the companies or special interests, who he's running against. And I think that's really resonated and kind of a good example of, what can be done, when, you take politics and adopt, things that work in the labor movement and, bring those into that.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is, I have a lot of listeners saying, Rick, this is why we need a labor party. Your fight with O'Brien, because you agree with O'Brien on about 80% of stuff. It's just this Trump stuff, the RFK Jr. stuff. Evidently, Sean O'Brien's a big RFK Jr. fan. But, the labor stuff does resonate across party lines. So I've got a lot of people who are saying, we need a labor party. And I'm going, you got one right now. The Democrats have been... I went to the convention, the most pro-labor convention I've ever been to. But Osborne does show that there's crossover when you're talking about better wages, hours, conditions, the ability to come home safe at the end of the day. Those issues resonate.
Yeah, because we outnumber the people, the wealthy, the people in power, the bosses. We've outprocreated
them. You're correct. But, I look at this race, and are you surprised by it? Because, look, I saw this, and I go, I think this guy might have a chance if he can get some money, get some boots on the ground, because the message is right. Are you surprised by it?
No, because initially when I spoke with Dan, I knew that he was really had the drive and was going to put in the work to become a viable candidate.
Yeah.
I think he's done that, and it's made Republicans getting scared. Big money's starting to flow in. So what was a safe Republican seat is now a competitive race.
No, look, it'd be great to see a Republican ousted in this senatorial cycle, because if the Democrats can hold the Senate, grab the House, and you get Harris in place, maybe we get those things that we need, like the PRO Act, like a smart tax code, like more investment in infrastructure and manufacturing, and all of those things that, well, we've been desperately needing for years. But Michael, as always, I appreciate the work you do over there at the Guardian US. Great stuff. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Always a pleasure, Rick.
Appreciate the time. Our good friend Michael Sainato. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you think Labor Party? I'm going to throw this out there because I know I got a couple of listeners who are already salivating at being able to tell me, I told you so. We need a Labor Party. Want to hear it? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw the story yesterday about Social Security, a 2.5% cost of living adjustment that's going to hit, I guess, starting next year. And look, you go 2.5%. Is that enough, given the fact that we've come out of a pretty high inflationary period? Even though inflation is down, wages are up, but Social Security hasn't kept up. I'm here to share some thoughts on that and some really big news on the Medicare front. I've asked my good friend Alex Lawson to come share some thoughts. He's the executive director over at Social Security Works, socialsecurityworks.org, the website. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks as always for having me.
So let's talk about this increase, 2.5%. That enough?
So the short answer is no. The COLA does not keep up with the costs that seniors, people with disabilities face. The longer answer is that it's automatically calculated based on inflation data. And so it actually is kind of good news because it shows just how low inflation is right now. But as a matter of people's lives, that the policy side, the neat policy side doesn't matter. What matters is that Democrats are fighting to increase that COLA permanently. You have almost a dozen bills in the Congress, and I don't want to go too deep into it. but it just changes the way that you calculate it to say that it would use the CPIE, which more accurately reflects the cost that seniors and people with disabilities face, which has a lot more healthcare in it than, say, vacation travel. Or I actually should be specific. It has more healthcare in it. That's the big thing.
Right.
Now, Republicans, what they are proposing, I mean, it's their proposal, is to cut the COLA. So they look at that 2.5% this year and they say, that's too generous. We need to cut that and make sure that people are getting less. So I think the only real news around the 2.5% is that it is consistently not enough. The COLA is currently not doing a good job of keeping up with the costs that seniors and people with disabilities are facing.
So if there's a joke to be had in this, it's Democrats want to make sure that the cat food is brand name and Republicans want you to buy the store brand.
I mean, that's a brutal joke, but yes, I think where we are is, like the increase wouldn't be enormous, but, all jokes aside, sometimes that is actually the difference between dignity and having enough money to eat every meal or having to skip meals or cut pills in half. And this is the richest country in the history of the world. So we're the idea that we're forcing anybody to make those choices is ridiculous. I'll also point out that most of the Democratic plans, they don't only increase the COLA. Senator Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have a bill that also increases everyone's benefit by $200 a month. Those are meaningful numbers.
Absolutely. No,
So
what we learned about childhood poverty in this country is $300 a month cuts childhood poverty in half.
Yeah. And what we also learned is that we can eliminate childhood poverty. We can just do it. And it worked perfectly. And then the politicians, Republicans, were like, no, we don't want to eliminate childhood poverty.
Right. And the reason I bring this up is there's been a lot of talk around my camp here of this both sidesism. I don't know if you've been following it, but you've got a major union leader who's, both parties suck. We're not endorsing anybody because they both suck. And I think that's disingenuous. I think it's ill-informed, and I think it's disingenuous. And look, Democrats may not have been the greatest. They may have fallen down in areas, but they weren't the Republicans who, as you've pointed out, are trying to destroy the benefit, privatize the benefit, didn't want you to get the benefit to begin with. So they don't seem to be the same to me.
I can just unequivocally say they're not even similar, and the Democrats need to do better. It's like not that hard to wrap your head around. I don't know how much you want to dwell on it, but we worked on the multi-employer pension bailout. Okay, which is the Teamsters.
It's not a bailout. They backstopped it like they would do any bank. They backstopped it like they would do any corporate interest. But this time, it benefited working people instead of billionaires.
And I use that word really specifically because the only other bailouts that I've ever seen in Washington, D.C. are to banks. This is the first time that I ever saw, and we've been working on it for years, no discussion previously was that the pensions were going to be made good at 100%. There was always talk of a haircut, right? And there's one guy who gets credit for not only getting it in there, but at 100%, and it's Joe Biden.
And there's one person who gets credit for passing it, and that's Kamala Harris being the deciding vote.
Absolutely. So the difference is so obvious if you actually work on policy. I think it's just it's so lazy and easy to be like, a pox on both their houses. That's just not. I'm sorry, we're adults. We have to live in this world. We have to make choices sometimes between two things that, one of them, we rarely get to make a choice of the perfect, right? We oftentimes only get to make a choice of a little bit better. And that is just the life that we have to accept that as adults in the room. And actually, the Joe Biden presidency with Kamala Harris as vice president. This is on domestic policy, best president of my lifetime, hands down. The guy walked a picket line. You know, the president of the United States of America standing on the side of workers against their corporate bosses and demanding higher wages in the era of this new flourishing of labor activity. It's clear. And do you know how many Republicans voted for the to make the pensions whole? 0. As always, they are the most anti-organized labor part. It's like one of the few things that unites all the factions of the current Republican Party. So yeah, the difference between the two is just stark.
But on a lot of issues, in Medicare and Medicaid as well. And look, I see a huge announcement this week from Kamala Harris, and this is a to steal a Joe Bidenism, this is a big freaking deal. And here recently, this now means a lot to me and my family, whereas, a month and a half ago, it wouldn't have meant as much. It would have been important, but wouldn't have been as much. That Kamala Harris has now come out and said that they want to expand Medicare to cover long-term care at home. And that is a huge, huge deal, especially, as what I'm looking at down the road. This is something I'm voting for.
Yeah, and I just on the policy side, I'll focus on the magnitude of this announcement. You can't understate it. What it means for people is just huge. Right now, we do not have a long-term care system in this country. And many people find that out when their loved one, someone that they love and care for, needs care. And they find that there are no choices. And oftentimes, a person only needs some amount of care. But really, it's in most places, it's a binary thing. You either get nothing or full institutionalization, right? So into a full-time skilled nursing facility, very little in between. And for any of those, you're talking about either paying out of pocket or going through a process to have the person get on Medicaid, which is not a long-term care system. It's just because we don't have one, it operates as the only one that we have. Yeah. And Medicaid is means tested. So a person first has to qualify for it by being poor. And that involves this. I've been in these discussions. It's heartbreaking. It's just in this country, people need to spend down assets so that they qualify for Medicaid. Sometimes people need to get divorced so that the long-term care doesn't bankrupt the entire family. I mean, come on. And what Kamala Harris did, I don't want to be too nerdy about it, but we were fighting for long-term care in Build Back Better, $400 billion. But it was still in Medicaid. It was built on the non-system as it operates today. But what Vice President Harris proposed, what Kamala Harris proposed, is a universal Medicare benefit that covers home-based health care for long-term care. That is huge. And it gives us the opportunity not only to change families' lives. And Rick, I can't find words to express, my feelings for what you're going through. That what families are facing in this country is a system that is just it is devoid of care by its non-existence, right? And Kamala Harris is saying we have the ability to do this. And I'll finish just the policy side. The amazing thing is also we can add this benefit, and the only thing we have to do to pay for it, for all the people who are like, oh, how are you going to pay for it? Is we lower the prices of drugs for more people and on more drugs. So you increase Medicare negotiation, and then you use the savings that generates to add a new universal home-based home care benefit to Medicare. It's just a beautiful proposal, and I am so happy to see it.
And I would argue that you would save money in people being able to stay in their homes as opposed to being institutionalized and put into nursing homes. Because I don't know if you've seen the price of a nursing home per month. Some of the ones in this area are $12,000 to $17,000 a month. So getting someone to come and help someone stay in their home seems logical, but more importantly, seems cost effective.
I think most importantly is, seems like a thing that we should have in this, which people call the greatest country on earth. If it is, then we got to take care of our people, matching that label, right? And you're absolutely right. We have all the data on this. Oftentimes, what people need is only a few hours of skilled nursing help a week, but we don't have a place for that, right? There's no system to really deliver that. So what you find is people who, and rich people can generally find whatever they're looking for. So yeah, if you have the money, but for everyone else, it's all the way into a full institutionalization. So a person's going into a nursing home where they will find that the average cost is around is six figures, and average across the country, right? And who can afford that? That's why people are forced into this spend down, transfer assets, get divorced, do whatever it takes so that getting the care that a loved one needs doesn't mean bankrupting the family. And I should also add, Rick, and I know you know this, but like currently the nursing home situation, private equity's bought up most of them. Many of these can be living hell because they're just seeing the people in them as profit centers to extract money from. They've fired their skilled nurses and they've brought on low wage workers, right? So the costs are enormous, but the workers who are working in these facilities aren't making good wages, and the care is substandard. And I'm not going to Pollyanna this, it's not like, oh, this solves everything, but it definitely can solve each of those pieces in the right direction. Yeah. As a universal benefit, you can ensure that you're paying good wages to skilled nurses to deliver great care at home and keep people out of nursing homes who don't need to be there. And so, yes, it absolutely saves money in the long term.
No, and look, you brought up the basically the privatization of the nursing homes. Here in this area where I'm at, they privatized one of the county homes, and we've been seeing this happen all across Pennsylvania, where nursing homes that were run by the county so that citizens would have somewhere to go have all been bought up by profiteers. And the first thing they do is slash and burn, the wages of the workers, bring in, like you said, low paid workers, low skilled workers who want to do a good job, but, just don't have the skills. It's all in the wrong direction. Now, what's interesting to me is I had a conversation right when this came out with someone. I said, look, I see this as something even more positive that conservatives should get on board with, because this could be an opportunity to recreate the 3-generation home, where, someone could stay home and raise the kids, but also get paid to take care of their mother or father, so that you have that kind of intergenerational connection again that we've lost over the last 30, 40 years. This is a way I think, maybe you got a different opinion, but a way maybe conservatives and Republicans, the God-fearing Christian folks might get on board with this.
We're going to have to see how the benefit is designed. But I will also say that we have and have had proposals that do exactly what you're saying, because it makes sense. Caregiving. Most of the long-term care in this country, I say, it doesn't have a system. People rely on Medicaid because they have no other choice. But what really it is in this country, we rely on unpaid caregiving by family. Right. So we just rely on the fact that families are going to take care of their loved ones. And they don't get any money for that.
The care economy seems logical to me, Alex, in that we're going to this AI tsunami of job loss that they predict is coming. This would be a good transition of, as we're losing whatever it's going to be, go home and take care of mom and dad.
Absolutely. I was just my long wind up, Rick, was to say the only part I disagree with you on is, we've had these proposals, and you know how many Republicans vote for them? Zero, because they're on the side of the private equity. And I don't want to, if you just Google nursing home private equity, you can read horror story after horror story after horror story And these guys are getting billions of dollars by just extracting wealth from us. And they monetize, financialize every aspect of our life, including the end of our lives. And the Republicans literally just work for the paymasters. The richest man in the world just got on stage with Donald Trump and did his dumb jump, right? It's not like they hide who they work for. They're on the side of private equity. So I do think maybe we could change that calculus some. But for the moment, we're going to have to focus on Democrats doing this all on their own, which is exactly what they did to get Medicare negotiation and all of the wins in the Inflation Reduction Act. Not a single Republican voted for any of those, right? So I don't think we're going to see a large change from Republicans, even though obviously, if anything they said was true about their focus on families. But you would see a whole host of different votes if that was true. That's just what they say to get power. Well,
the hope is the Republican voters start thinking that way. But I loved your statement there, extracting wealth from us. That is the nicest way to say ripping us off.
It is, although, I don't mean it in a nice way, Rick. I mean it in a way of what these people are vampires. They're literal soulless vampires who look around the world, the country and the world, and they look for opportunities to break things. They look for things that work. The American pension system worked. They came in with ball-peen hammers, smashed that to smithereens. Workers lost, Wall Street won, and out of the wreckage, right? I mean, who could say that anything got better? The 401k experiment is a failure. Workers are left holding the bag, of course, because they're not building these private equities, these Wall Street billionaires, however you want to call them, this vampire class of parasites. They're not building anything. They don't build anything. They just extract money. And now with healthcare, long-term care, what we're seeing as our population ages is that, the big cash cow for them is literally us and our health and our well-being. And it's never by providing healthcare that they make money, right? And privatized Medicare, so-called Medicare Advantage. It's by denying our healthcare. So they get the levers of power and they make money by sucking it out of whatever system works. And in its wreckage, the working people lose. They lose something. The billionaires get another golden yacht. And we keep sort of looking around, wondering what's happening. And the answer is really clear. The billionaires are happening. They're happening to us. Yep. And until we really confront that, I think, we're going to have we're going to have more of what we're seeing right now.
I'm right there with you. Alex Lawson, I appreciate the time. Always great stuff. This is good news. Another reason to get out in November and vote. Alex, I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Rick.
Alex Lawson, Executive Director there at Social Security Works. Check out their website, socialsecurityworks.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day that Mary Heaton Vorse was born in New York City. Mary grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts, in a family with significant financial means. She traveled across Europe with her parents, where she received her education and learned to speak multiple languages fluently. She then worked as a book reviewer for the Criterion magazine. In 1912, Mary and the man who would be her husband witnessed what would be known as the Bread and Roses textile strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The experience was a great turning point in her life. She later wrote, "Both Joe O'Brien and I had come a long road to get to Lawrence. Together, we experienced the realization of the human cost of our industrial life. Something transforming happened to both of us. We knew now where we belonged, on the side of the workers and not with the comfortable people among whom we were born. Some synthesis had taken place between my life and that of the workers. Some peculiar change that would never again permit me to look with indifference on the fact that riches for the few were made by misery of the many. It was in Lawrence that we realized what we must do, that we could make one contribution, that of writing the workers' story as long as we lived. For more than 50 years after Lawrence, Mary traveled the United States, reporting and participating in strikes and the labor movement. She wrote about the 1919 steel strike and the lumber workers' strike in the Pacific Northwest. She wrote about the struggles of auto workers and textile workers and child labor. In 1962, the United Auto Workers honored Mary with their Social Justice Award. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think it's a great idea that Kamala Harris has proposed. The idea of ensuring that people get to stay in their home, get skilled care at home. I would like to also throw in there the idea of ensuring that family members can be part of that skilled training. Think about the possibilities of, I look at the situation that our family is in right now. As I've said, my wife is out of the ICU. So as they say that the question of her survival is now pretty much answered. She's going to survive. She's going to live. And that's amazing. From the beginning, we were not given that option. They told us that chances are not going to make it. Start making arrangements. And now we're going, okay, what kind of life is she going to have? Is she going to recover fully? Which is what we're clearly hoping for. But if it's anything less than that and she needs help, would it not be better in the home as opposed to an institution? Now, I have said we will not put her in a nursing home. We will figure it out at home because fortunately I think I'm able to do that. But it would be really helpful if we had a program to ensure that families didn't have to try and cobble that together. And that maybe it's a way to strengthen families. My daughter would love to have the ability to that be her job, to ensure that mom gets the care she needs. And who would care for her better? And that, to me, that's kind of a big deal. So now this issue becomes a lot more personal because it's a lot closer to home. Always something I wanted to see, always something I wanted to see expanded. Because look, ultimately, as we get older, we're all going to have to make these choices. As we reach, certain age, this idea: can we keep up a home? Can we stay at home? Can we take care of ourselves in our own home? Those become questions as you get older. And to have someone to aid you in that, some bit of assistance in your own, is one, obviously, the cheapest way of going about it. The most cost-effective, the most efficient way of doing it. But also the most dignified, I'd argue. My mother worked in a nursing home for years when I was a kid. Now, obviously, from the 70s till today, much different kind of situation. Back then, there were like 4 people in a room. They were basically just warehousing poor people. Things have gotten better, I'm told, and places are nicer and they do more things, but still not surrounded by loved ones. Still not in what you recognize, and still a major life change, especially for people who are struggling. For me, this sounds like an opportunity to recreate what what I grew up believing was that nuclear family, the Waltons, if you will, where multiple generations are in the same house taking care of each other. And look, as housing prices continue, the cost of living continues to be high. This is an opportunity to solve some of those problems as well. As job losses come because of AI, and we're told this tsunami is going to happen, seems like a way to move forward for people who want that. Because understand, the care economy is something we're going to have to deal with as the baby boom generation moves into their final days. As my generation, the Gen Xers start moving there. this is a way to have that transition for an economy as well. So for me, it's about obviously the dignity and everything that comes with being the individual who needs it, but also about the jobs that are going to be created that are going to support families. There are opportunities here if we make the right choice. And I want to finish up where I started, because you've got some, and I've been pointing at Sean O'Brien because he's the one who's been getting the most attention. This idea that both parties suck, that both of them are terrible, both of them are screwing us over. This is another one of those issues where both parties aren't the same, not even close. So for me, when you say that, they're both terrible, at least know what you're talking about, or at least state what you're talking about. That to me would be a good start. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. And as always, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.